What did this martial arts fan favorite, American Ninja, have in common with the African-American cult classic Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo? Who did the producers want to play the American Ninja before they cast Michael Dudikoff? These and more questions explored on this episode of
Bat Look Cinema, the podcast.
Workers found him in the jungle where they were building a road. Brought him back to the States with total amnesia. Here it is. I knew it. Sent to reform school at age 16 for almost killing a man. A few months ago, got in trouble again. Judge gave him a choice. Enlist or go to jail. Hi, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 185th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that quiet soldier over there about Backlook Cinema. Now, here's the thing. I really did think that I saw this movie when I was growing up. I remember watching a movie with a Caucasian man training to be a ninja, and I thought this was the one. And as I watched this film, I realized this is not the one. Apparently, there's a plethora of movies where you got white guys training to be ninjas, and not that I didn't think that there wasn't more than one, but I thought I chose the right one. The title sounded right. The guy looked like the guy that I remember. It's possible that I saw one of the sequels, but I'm not exactly curious enough to find out which sequel I saw. This movie had a bunch of sequels, or I may have seen a different movie with a similar concept. I did a little bit of research and I really couldn't find it. It's not like you can Google your memories. So I watched this film thinking that it'd be a rewatch, but this is actually a first-time watch. First time I'm seeing this movie. It's not even a movie that I can say that it feels like I'm watching it for the first time because I hadn't seen it in such a long time. I don't think I've ever seen this movie. I'm like 90% sure of it. And it has at least one actor in this movie that I'm familiar with, that I've seen him in other movies. I've actually talked about him on other episodes of this podcast. And he's more prominently featured in this film than he has been in some of the other films that I've seen. However, this movie is not a movie I've seen before. So I get to evaluate it. You get to join me on this journey about checking out this movie for the first time, and we're going to see what's what. I'm going to talk about my experience watching this movie. I'm going to do the breakdown of some of the, I guess, the major plot points. I tried to find some parts that I could consider my favorite parts, but I don't have any of those nostalgic feelings for this movie. So if something is bad in this movie, then it's just going to feel bad. It's not going to feel cute, or it's not something that I'm going to be able to forgive. But this movie has some flaws, and I am almost programmed to point them out. But anyway, since this is a movie about ninjas, let's take a kind of a shallow dive into the ninja. Ninja, also known as Shinobi no Mono, or simply Shinobi, was a popular figure in Japanese folklore. There's still debate as to whether they actually existed, as there's not much about them in the historical record, as one might expect from a secret society. And much of the things that we associate with the ninja are modern innovations. For example, they didn't dress in black pajamas or masks. Ninjas were meant to be saboteurs, thieves, and informants. The style of dress that's popularized by folklore and popular media would have been too obvious and conspicuous. Unlike samurai, who were dedicated to a shogun and fought with a code of honor on the battlefield based on their devotion to Bushido, ninjas hired their services to the highest bidder and operated as spies and sometimes assassins, both professions that were considered dishonorable in the earlier times, and ninja didn't bother with honorable fighting techniques. In the 1980s, the ninja absolutely captured the American imagination. There were various comic books, novels, and TV shows that featured ninjas, and in the 80s, they were everywhere. The Hand from the Daredevil comics, and various characters in comics that were trained by ninjas like Psylocke, Batman, Kick-Ass, Deathstroke, Ronin, and Elektra. There were popular toys like the G.I. Joe action figures, Storm Shadow, and Snake Eyes. And of course, there was an entire cast of characters in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The American movies that featured ninjas in the 1980s were plentiful. The Octagon, Enter the Ninja, and its 2 sequels. The 5 American ninja movies, Pray for Death, Rage of Honor, Sakura Killers, White Phantoms, Force of the Ninja, Silent Assassins, Ninja Vengeance, etc. I too was caught up in the popularity of ninjas, and I was always delighted to see them in film. So let's talk about the one that I thought I saw, but didn't. American Ninja. Private Joe Armstrong is a man of few words and tends to keep to himself. He would prefer not to talk to anyone if he could help it, and is not inclined to group activities, and yet he somehow finds himself in the Army, where teamwork is critical. Though Joe would rather fade into the background, he is suddenly thrust into action when his convoy squad is attacked by terrorists, aided by a group of deadly shinobi. Joe shows extraordinary skill at fighting the attackers, but in spite of his heroic efforts, he is greeted by scorn and punishment when he returns to base. He will later discover that things aren't what they seem to be at the base, and the attack on his convoy was no arbitrary incident. He will have to use his amazing skills to uncover the corruption, skills that have been passed down for dozens of generations, originating in feudal Japan. The skills of a ninja. Released August 30th, 1985, produced by the Cannon Group and Golan Globus Productions. It grossed over $10 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $1 million. Now that's how you make a profit. That's how you make a profit right there. Canon is often criticized for making extremely cheap, cutting the budgets down to the bare bones, like spending as little money as possible. They're not the ones to say, I spared no expense. They don't do that over at Canon. So, this movie made a huge profit, and that's mainly how they continue to stay in business, is by spending as little money as possible, and actually putting out decent enough films that make a tidy profit. And this is excellent. This is excellent profit. So if you, translate it to today's dollars, the gross would have been 29 million thereabouts. And the reported budget would have been around 2 million if it were released today. So this is roughly 10 times. Like you put in some money, and the return on your investment is roughly 10 times of what you invested in it. That's absolutely amazing. So this movie starred Michael Dudikoff as Private Joe Armstrong. He was a darling for Canon, starring in several of their productions. You may have also seen him in such movies as Platoon Leader, Bachelor Party, or In Her Defense. The actor that I mentioned before that I'm familiar with is Steve James. He plays Corporal Curtis Jackson, and you may have seen him in To Live and Die in L.A., I'm Going to Get You Sucker that we covered in episode 65 that I did with Suni Hepburn and Brandy Fleeks from the Book of Lies podcast. And that is a classic. Basically pairing a parody of all of the, I guess, black kung fu fighters in blaxploitation movies. And then he was in The Warriors. I totally missed him because he was caked in makeup. He played one of the baseball Furies, and I actually talked about The Warriors on the May 26th episode of Movie Lovers Unite with John D. Gregorio. And that is a cult classic. The female lead was Judie Harrison. She played Patricia Hickok, and you may have seen her in Weird Science, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, or Desert Kickboxer. Gwitch Kook played Colonel Hickok, and he's mostly been on television, but you may have seen him in movies such as Piranha, Square Dance, Screen Door Jesus. I have not seen any of these movies, but you might have. John Fujioka plays Shinyuki, and he's been in Mortal Kombat from 1985, Pearl Harbor, or Who Finds a Friend Finds a Treasure. When I see him, he's usually kind of in the background. He's barely more than an extra most times that I see him. Don Stewart plays Ortega. You may have seen him in a lot of TV shows and soap operas, but he has been in a couple of movies. You may have seen him in Listen, and he also did a voice on Rover Dangerfield. John LaMotta plays First Sergeant Rinaldo, and you may have seen him in Vampire in Brooklyn or Running Scared that we covered in episode 39. Tadashi Yamashita plays Black Star Ninja, and he's also been in Rising Sun and The Octagon. At last we have Philip Brock. He plays Private First Class Charlie Madison, and he's been in movies that I haven't seen, like River's Edge and Enough Said. This movie was directed by Sam Firstenberg, and you may have seen some of his movies. Most of these movies I've never heard of, like One More Chance or Cyborg Cop. But then there are a couple of movies that he's done that I have heard of, like Break Into Electric Boogaloo, and that's what this movie has in common with American Ninja. I just wouldn't expect somebody who would direct American Ninja to also direct a breakdancing movie. He also did Avenging Force and Revenge of the Ninja, which is his highest rated film on Rotten Tomatoes at 6.0. Most of his other films are like 3 point something or 4 point something. This movie was written by Paul DeMilce, Avi Kleinberger, and Gideon Amir. Paul DeMilce, he did the American Ninja screenplay. Avi Kleinberger and Gideon Amir have only done one other movie. Like Paul DeMilce, this is his only movie. But Kleinberger and Amir, they done one other movie that they wrote, and that was POW Escape. I think most of these people, especially, actually, I don't see any other credits for DeMilce. I feel like he did this one movie and he doesn't really have any other credits or mentions on IMDb. But Kleinberger and Amir, they're mostly producers, and they're not exactly known for their writing. So that's why they have scant writing credits. I feel like this movie is like a bunch of producers kind of like got together and they kind of hammered out a movie. The music was composed by Michael Lynn. You may have heard some of his work in Snapdragon, Survival Game, Night Screams, again with Break Into Electric Boogaloo, a rap movie called Rappin' that starred Mario Van Peebles, and Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold. I will say that the soundtrack in this movie was not particularly inspiring. It was just serviceable. This movie is like one of those movies like the previous movie that I talked about last week is a perfectly serviceable action movie. This is definitely one of those movies that you could turn on and have in the background as you fold your laundry or chop onions or some other domestic chore. It's perfectly serviceable. And it's just fine, right? I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of people that have a lot of nostalgia for this film, and there are the quirks and the errors in this film they might find charming and beautiful, but because I don't think I don't feel that. I don't feel that nostalgia connection to this film, even though I've seen movies like this, or at least pieces of movies like this. I hadn't seen anything that was, it doesn't fill me with that love and affection cause there are bad movies that I like. And this is, I think a lot of people might consider this a bad B movie. And there are bad B movies that I like, but so I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to love a movie that everybody considers bad, or that is generally looked down upon, or something of that nature. And I wish I felt that for this movie, but I don't. So that's it for the opening credits. As for the announcements, please check out my shop on backlookcinema.shop. I can't even speak. backlookcinema.com/shop. And I'm still working on the eBay shop, Bazaar de Alonso. Let's go over and talk about, or at least attempt to talk about, some of my favorite parts. There are a couple. I was able to pick out and extract maybe a couple of favorite parts. So let's talk about those. With some of these movies, I'm struggling to find a theme. And as a matter of fact, I feel like a lot of times I am just inserting a theme in a movie where there is none. I'm convinced that, the storytellers are trying to say something, that they have something going on, that there's an overall message that they're trying to communicate with these movies. And maybe there is a theme, or maybe there isn't. It's hard to tell sometimes. So does American Ninja have a theme? Maybe. What I'm able to extract from it is that this movie has an overall theme of community. So you got a soldier named Joe, and he's a loner, and he's the type of loner that don't want to be bothered. He's like, I guess he's like the John Rambo type, or I can't think of another example, but just somebody who wants to be left to his own devices. He doesn't want to participate in his community or his team, or he needs to learn to embrace the esprit de corps. And it seems like he lacks it. And his fellow soldiers seem to resent him for his lack of brotherhood that he has. Like, you're in the army, you are part of a team, you're part of a unit, and you're expected to gel with that unit. You're expected to have some kind of chemistry with that unit. And Joe doesn't want to have chemistry with anybody. He doesn't want to know anybody. He doesn't want to talk to anybody. He would rather be left alone. But it's kind of hard to do that when you're essentially in a team sport. So throughout the movie, Joe slowly learns to rely and trust on some of the members of his team. Some of the people who were antagonistic towards him in the beginning learn to have a sense of appreciation for him later on. They start to believe him when he has a situation. He has to tell people what's going on and nobody believes him. That there are people who are slowly starting to believe him. And then it gets to the point where the other soldiers kind of rally around him by the end of the movie, and he learns at least a couple of soldiers he learns to trust and rely on. So he starts to learn some of that esprit de corps. He starts to learn engage in some of the teamwork by the end of the movie. So it might be an unintentional theme. But that is the theme that I have extracted from this movie. So, like I said, I did have a couple of favorite parts. One of my favorite things about this movie were the fights. The fights were why we watch movies like this. The fights were decent. They weren't, I don't want to say they weren't outstanding fights. They were serviceable. Because this is a perfectly serviceable action flick. But there were a lot of things I liked about the fight. They employed so many different weapons. You had the classical ninja weapons, such as the ninja stars, that being the shuriken. I think at some point somebody pulls out a side or a couple of sides. There were the swords that they had, and then you had the Black Star Ninja, and he had a bunch of extra weapons that nobody seemed to have. It looked nice. They ran around like you imagine ninjas running around. They basically behave like ninjas are supposed to behave. And there were so many ninjas. I found that utterly delightful, just having so many ninjas on the screen and so many different colors sometimes, right? So, all the ninjas running around, the martial arts action, it was all pretty good. Not great, not fantastic, but it was pretty good. It was entertaining. So of this film, that's one of my favorite parts. Another one of my favorite parts, or I should say my favorite performer of the film was Steve James. Unfortunately and forever kind of dedicated to being the sidekick character. Not quite the magical not quite the magical Negro. I was about to say the magical ninja. Not quite the magical Negro, because even though he helps the main Caucasian character on his path, he doesn't have any special knowledge. He doesn't have any magical powers. There's nothing unusual or unique about him other than that he knows martial arts and he's very good at it, but he doesn't know or is as proficient as the main character. So it's not like he has any special insight on what the main character needs. He helps the main character out when the main character needs help, but he's not really helping the main character to grow and learn and all the other stuff that you would typically expect from the magical Negro. So he's the Negro sidekick that's in a lot of 80s movies. He's and I feel like that's most of his roles. If he's not in a blaxploitation film, or like the role he had in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, where he's kind of being a parody of himself, then if he's in a movie with a white movie star, then he's going to be the black sidekick or the black background character. And he has this amazing physique. He has a super chin. He actually knows martial arts, and the scenes in it, he looks good, and he exudes a kind of charisma when he's on the screen. I mean, he's actually acting in a way that Michael Dudikoff is not. And I know that Michael Dudikoff is trying to pull off the silent and brooding, and I kind of talked about this with Jean-Claude Van Damme. I think Michael Dudikoff is a little bit better at it. I think because he's probably more trained in acting. Is like acting is his main deal. That's his main function. Where for Van Damme, it was his martial arts. So Dudikoff is acting, and he's pulling off that silent and brooding, and he's more effective than Jean-Claude Van Damme, but it's still not as impactful as you would hope it to be. And I don't know. I think there might be something maybe not normal in somebody who's just quiet and brooding all the time. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm talking out about, but maybe I don't know how to judge actors. Anyway, so Steve James is one of my favorite parts. So that's 2. Can I get to 5? Before I continue with my favorite parts, I do want to address some of the minor criticisms that I had about this movie. Just kind of just me personally, just like where some of the things I saw just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So one of those things is that, like, for instance, if you're in a profession and you have a movie or TV show that is depicting your profession, you can pick out some of the things that are erroneous. And for me, since I used to be in the Army and I'm watching a movie that features the Army, I'm picking out a bunch of stuff that are mad crazy erroneous in this movie. Like, for example, the uniforms are all kind of jacked up. They're worn sloppily. They're the wrong uniform for the era. So, for example, in the beginning of the film, they're wearing, and throughout most of the movie, most of the soldiers are wearing this olive green uniform. And this movie is supposed to take place around the mid 1980s, and the uniform they're wearing is from the Korean War era. So it's like, it's the wrong uniform. You can kind of spot it right away. And the Korean War, as I said, was basically a plain olive green, and the uniform that they should have been wearing would have been an abstract pattern of darker green, brown, and black. And you do see that uniform show up like in the middle of the movie and at the end of the movie, but not throughout most of the movie. So that was weird. That was kind of a weird choice. Maybe it was budgeting concerns that had caused that. And like I said, the uniforms were sloppily worn. Buttons not buttoned correctly, sleeves rolled up sloppily. It was that kind of thing. Sometimes the rank was missing where it should have been. There were times when they should have been wearing a hat and they weren't wearing a hat or a helmet when they were when they were riding motorcycles. Just a lot of like little things like that were all wrong. Obviously, because it's the 1980s, they're not going to be firing their weapons as just their soldiers are supposed to, but they're shooting from the hip because that was the style of shooting weapons in the 1980s. But the uniforms were really kind of bad. And like near the end of the film, they just seemed to wear whatever. They basically it felt like they were wearing whatever they wanted to wear. So that was, a slight criticism that I had. Also, there were some story elements that were kind of baffling until you get later on in the movie. And the movie, like, I had questions and the movie answered its questions in the narrative. So at least some of the things that at first I thought were wrong later on made sense. So I did appreciate that. In the beginning of this movie, they go on a mission, and this mission, it's a vehicle convoy, and in the convoy, they have to transport this equipment. And I'm not sure where they're supposed to be going with the equipment, but the convoy is being led by the platoon sergeant, who is in his dress uniform. The soldiers are in their regular uniforms. Well, they're what we call the battle dress uniform, and which in this case happened to be olive green that I mentioned earlier. And with the first sergeant is the colonel's daughter. The colonel is the commander of the base. I later found out that this whole movie is supposed to be taking place in the Philippines, but I don't remember them ever actually saying that it was in the Philippines. I think they just wanted the audience to assume that that's where the base was. And so the first sergeant is riding with the daughter, and they're being driven by a private. So everybody in this first vehicle, they're dressed in like an office uniform, and the daughter is dressed in like her regular civilian clothes. And as they're driving down this path, they get attacked at first by a group of bandits. Like the bandits are dressed as construction workers, and they block the path off. And then after they block the path, they pull out their weapons, their, machine guns, and it's like, get out the trucks. And they intended to steal the cargo. They was going to steal the trucks and the cargo. And the thing about it is that I was like, wow, they seemed really unprepared for this. But the thing about it is I've ridden in convoys, where we're basically unarmed. If they give us any armament, they would be like our weapons, like our M16s, but with no ammo, if they gave us anything at all. So that was actually kind of realistic. The only thing that I would say is that since it's not actually stateside, I find it remarkable that the soldiers weren't armed in any way. Like, sure, the ambush would still have worked had the soldiers have been armed, but but they weren't armed at all. They weren't armed. They didn't have, any kind of armament. They were just driving through the jungle like they were on stateside, and they weren't stateside. They were in a different country. So I don't know even though I was a soldier, I didn't have the totality of the army existence. So I don't know what they were doing in other countries. I don't know how they got around. I don't know if they totally armored up and went out like with all of their weapons and whatnot when they went on a convoy in someplace like the Philippines, or if they did it in Germany or someplace else. I've only been to like an actual battle zone and stateside. So in a battle zone, obviously you're going to have all your weapons when you go outside the gate. Even when you're inside the gate, you have some weapons. And when you're outside the gate, you have everything else. So I just thought that was weird. Anyway, they get ambushed first and the soldiers the bandits that ambushed them, they show that they're really inept because they got all the weapons, and yet you have Private Joe Armstrong. He's like really annoyed that the convoy was stopped by these bandits. Like, he's a loner. He doesn't want to like join in any of the group fun. But like when he's stopped by the convoy, he's really annoyed, and he's barely cooperating with the bandits. Like all the other soldiers are like, cooperating. They got their hands up because, they don't have any guns or whatnot. But even though Joe doesn't have a gun or anything, he's still ready to fight, even with guns pointing at him. And then when one of the bandits gets rough with the colonel's daughter, that's Patricia Hickok, he's roughing her up because she's being extremely resistant, and she's acting even more of this is more of an inconvenient than the Joe is. She's actually acting like a Karen at this point. Like, how dare you do this to us? How dare you hold us at gunpoint and delay our travel? That's basically her attitude about it. And she also was trying to drive away or whatever, but it doesn't actually work. So, when Joe sees Patricia get roughed up, he starts fighting them. Now he's full on fighting the bandits, and the bandits are taken by surprise. They don't immediately start shooting at him or any of the other soldiers. So the other soldiers take this as a cue to start fighting back. And then all the soldiers starts fighting and they start winning, even though they don't have guns. And even though the bandits have all the guns, because these bandits are totally inept, which glorious. And like I said, the fights in this movie were my favorite part. And I love that one dude start fighting. So all the other soldiers start fighting. Like they don't just take that, as a cue to not participate in a fist fight. So they actually start winning the fight. And all of a sudden some ninjas show up and they stop that nonsense. They start cutting people. They start using blow darts. They start choking people using ropes. They start killing the soldiers. It was, but one person that seemed to be able to defend himself against the ninja was Joe. It's like they're shooting arrows at Joe. Joe was knocking the arrows out of the sky. They're trying to attack Joe, but Joe was able to deflect their attacks. And they realize that he has some skills. This white dude is not just some regular soldier. And even the leader of this group of ninjas, he is the Black Star Ninja, because apparently in this movie, the Black Star is a kind of rank that denotes him as like a leader or very proficient in ninjutsu. And as the Black Star Ninja, as a leader of this group of ninjas that's attacking this convoy, he has identified Joe as using ninjutsu. So he calls him, he says that he's the American ninja. Like when he, after this is all over and he reports back to his superiors, he says, yeah, there's that American over there is a ninja. They have their own American ninja. So when the ninjas show up, there's not much Joe can do for the rest of the troops. They're being, cut with swords and whatnot, but he's able to grab the colonel's daughter and they're able to escape. And all the while she's like complaining and whatnot. Like she complains that she can't keep up with Joe, running away from ninjas trying to kill them. So they stop. He breaks off her heels and so that she can run. And then he cuts her dress and ties it into a kind of, pants, sort of. He ties them off so that she can run properly. And then it's like she won't shut up. She won't stop complaining. So he has to cover her mouth to keep her from giving away their position. It's like she doesn't realize the danger that she's in. And that's sort of comical, but it's so outrageous that, it's not as funny, I think, as they hoped that it would be. So they escape, they get back to the base, and Joe doesn't receive a hero's welcome. He is chastised by the colonel for not just letting the bandits take the stuff that they were trying to steal, because he claimed that, and they did actually get away with the stuff. The colonel claimed that the stuff wasn't worth that much. You should just let the bad guys take it. But this is problematic. It's like you're in the military, you just don't let people take your stuff, right? I'm not saying that you die for it. Like if you had no way to defend it, then yeah, you would have to give it up. But he was fighting back. The soldiers were fighting back. Since they were in a position to fight back, they needed to fight back. But in any case, the colonel getting mad and punishing Joe, that was wrong. That was, and then it was so odd that all the other soldiers were mad at him for defending the convoy, that feels like an unrealistic response to a fight. Like where you fight as a service member, and even when you lose the fight, it's not like you made a mistake. Like if he made an error or he made a mistake in tactics or something like that, and if he was in charge, that's one thing, but he wasn't in charge. He was just resisting the adversaries. And that's not something that your fellow soldiers should have a negative reaction. It should be more of a positive reaction, even if it's not a celebratory reaction. It shouldn't be where they start to hate on him even more. Weird. Now that he's back, it's just a weird response to being under attack and barely escaping with your life. It's a weird response for everybody else to be mad at you for that to happen. The other thing that was weird is that in conversation where I guess the colonel is talking to his first sergeant, he's talking about, well, that's the third attack that we've had on these convoys. And I'm thinking to myself, that's your third attack and you're sending your soldiers out unarmed and unarmored? That's wild. And I'm trying to figure out why they would do that. But later on in the movie, they explain, we get a reason for why the soldiers were so ill-equipped to handle all of these attacks on the convoys that are being sent out. So I will say that one of my favorite parts of this film was we get to see the ninja camp. So later on in the film, we see the true mastermind behind all of the madness. It is a man named Ortega, Senor Ortega. He is, I'm not exactly sure what he is. I just know that he's rich and he owns a lot of stuff. And what his purpose is that he's trying to steal these weapons so that he can sell them to a buyer. And he has a particular buyer that's ready to buy these. And they're not even weapons. I don't know what they are because we're told that they're not anything that is worth dying for. That's what the colonel says. So this equipment. So he's selling this equipment to an interested party. And he's taking them on a trip through his training camp. It's actually not his training camp. It's a training camp for the ninjas that he hired. So the ninjas, as I said, are run by the Black Star Ninja, and you see a bunch of ninjas just going through a whole bunch of different activities, and they're dressed in different colors. And so it's like watching the Power Rangers. It's like watching the Power Rangers in training. So you had the Black Rangers, the Black Ninjas, the blue ninjas, the red ninjas, the yellow ninjas, all of the ninjas running around in training in different colors, honing their skills, to be as deadly as they can. But there's one where they do like an exhibition fight where you had like 5 of the, I think they were black ninjas or maybe they were the red ninjas, 5 of the red ninjas that were fighting against the Black Star Ninja, and he just soundly beat all of them, probably killed one of them. And this was supposed to be an exhibition to demonstrate how great these, basically this private army, how great this private army is. So I did enjoy the ninja camp. There's a part later on in the movie at around this time where you have Joe, he's antagonized by Corporal Curtis Jackson, and that's played by Steve James. And antagonized mean that everybody's still mad at him for defending his convoy, which again is kind of weird. And they're really mad because he's such a loner. Like he's not a team player. So they're mad at him for not really being cooperative or having that cooperative spirit that you would expect from somebody that, that's in a unit, that's on a team. They call him a lone wolf or a lone gunman or something like that. And so they're basically, or at least the corporal is basically bullying him and trying to goad him into a fight. So you have Joe, he's working on the truck. And so they finally succeeds. The corporal is like swinging and grabbing, and Joe is basically just evading the corporal. Like he's, stepping aside the corporal, he's pushing him against the wall, and he's flipping him and just tossing him on the ground, but really not truly engaging the corporal in the fight. Just kind of defending himself enough to embarrass the corporal in front of his soldiers, because the corporal is the martial arts expert on the base. He is the martial arts instructor, and with all of his skill and knowledge, he has this soldier that he doesn't like, just basically embarrassing him. And so So he yields. He loses the fight, and he yields to Joe. And, later on, he's trying to ask Joe where he learned his skills from. And Joe admitted that he had amnesia because of an explosion, and he doesn't remember how he was taught. Like, he get glimpses of being taught, but he doesn't remember like who taught him. Right now, the skills are just muscle memory. But I did like that entanglement with between Joe and the corporal. Later on, you learn that first you learn the sergeant is in league with Ortega, Senior Ortega. He's making a deal with Ortega that he's going to arrange it so that Joe is like out of the way. Like, he's going to do something about that private. So at first he's trying to get the private locked up, but the private somehow it doesn't stick. Like, he doesn't stay locked up. So the next thing Ortega wants is that they need to kill the private. Later on, the first sergeant sends a private on this mission. He's supposed to take this truck to somewhere, I don't know, to another destination, and it's got equipment on it. And then he gets to the place that he's supposed to make the delivery, and he drives it into one of the warehouses in the base. And inside the warehouse, he's ambushed by ninjas. And so you had a bunch of ninjas doing all the ninja trickery, and they're attacking the American ninja. And he's quick, he's savvy, he's skilled, he's able to get away from the ninja. And this is a fabulous fight. There's a pretty good, decent fight with one man against a bunch of ninjas. And so he's able to fight them off and make his escape. So that was a wonderful scene. It's one of my favorite parts of this movie. We did learn that because Joe was sent into an ambush, that it was Ronaldo, the first sergeant, and Senior Ortega that set up Joe. They were trying to trap Joe so that Joe could be killed, and then Joe escapes. And then later on, you learn that the Colonel and Ortega are in league. So now you know why everybody, it's particularly why the Colonel is mad that Joe had interfered with the ambush. And you learn why the Colonel is sending out all of these soldiers unarmed and unprepared to be attacked by bandits. You learn why all of these things are happening. So it sort of makes sense that both the Colonel and the first sergeant are in league with the main bad guy to arrange to have army equipment stolen so that the bad guy can sell the equipment to his buyers. I kind of like that they made that make sense, because I was getting a little frustrated with why there weren't any proper procedures being followed, and we got an answer for that. During the time that Joe was trying to escape from the ninjas, there was what do you call him? He was like a groundskeeper. The groundskeeper is a Japanese man, helped him to escape. So the groundskeeper, his name was Shinyuki, and Joe learns that Shinyuki was the man who trained him. Shinyuki was the man who had found him somewhere. I guess it was in Japan. I'm not exactly sure. He found him alone and or maybe it was the Philippines. I don't know. I don't know. Somewhere, because Shinyuki was supposed to be a Japanese soldier who didn't know that World War II had ended. He was still kind of fighting the war, and they had to explain to him that the war was over. And he was on he was hiding in the jungles of the Philippines. It's based on an actual story of a Japanese soldier that was stationed in the Philippines. He was fighting and surviving in the jungles of the Philippines, and he didn't know that World War II had been over for decades. And so the Shinyuki character is based on this. So at least the story that we're told is that Shinyuki was found by Senor Ortega, and Senor Ortega made him a groundskeeper. But somewhere along that line, Shinyuki had found a little white boy and nursed him back to health and trained him in all the arts of ninjutsu. And then there was an explosion and he was separated from the boy. The boy was rescued by, I think, some Americans. And now, and this is all kind of explained in a flashback. And then while Joe is trying to escape the other ninjas, Shinyuki finds him, hides him away, and tells him about his origins. And of course, Joe doesn't remember most of it. But Shinyuki kind of convinces him, it's like, this is, being a ninja is your destiny, and this, that, and the other. And gives him a nifty ninja outfit, for his troubles. This all happens near the end of the film. This is like near the climax of the film. A lot of stuff happens in the movie, but eventually what happens is that Senor Ortega kidnaps Patricia, the colonel's daughter, in order to get the colonel to be more compliant. Ortega feels like the colonel is having cold feet about this whole operation. So the colonel, being incensed, he gathers up the men at the base in order to go rescue his daughter. Meanwhile, Joe's already at the base with Shinyuki. He dons a ninja outfit, and then he goes out to rescue the colonel's daughter. I think that's one of his goals. I'm not sure if he's particularly interested in trying to stop the arms deal. I don't think that's his main passion or concern. So they go out and they prepare to fight like over 50 ninjas, just him and Shinyuki. And so they're in this great big fight. And then during the fight, the army shows up led by Colonel Hickok, and they're going, guns a-blazing, just shooting a bunch of ninjas and various other ruffians. It's a huge action-packed set piece of an ending, and it was glorious. I watched it twice. And so there's a lot of kicking and stabbing and shooting going on. So at one point, Joe is fighting. He's fighting a bunch of ninjas, and he's defeating them. And he's spotted by the Black Star Ninja. Shinyuki, also dressed in ninja garb, because at this point, pretty much, if you're not a soldier or a gangster, then you have to be a ninja. That's the only people that's at this part of the film right now. There's soldiers, gangsters, and ninjas, and one civilian, one kidnapped civilian. And so that everybody's fighting in this set piece. Shinyuki sees that Joe is in trouble. He can see the Black Star Ninja about to take down Joe. So Shinyuki goes into a prayer pose and teleports. He's the only ninja to do this. He teleports, he reappears in a cloud of smoke, and he's able to block the knife that was headed for the American ninja that he considers his son. And then he dies, and then you have Joe go chasing down the Black Star Ninja. And then during this pursuit, it's like a fighting pursuit. And so during this pursuit, the Black Star Ninja has a bunch of stuff that other ninjas just don't have. At one point, he shoots some kind of projectile that are kind of like bullets. You don't know what they are because you can't quite see them, but they're either darts or they're bullets. He fires at the American ninja and misses. And then at another point, he shoots a laser beam because the Black Star Ninja, he's special, and he has special weapons and equipment. So he shoots a laser at the American ninja, and that fails. And eventually Joe is able to prevail over the Black Star Ninja. at another point, after defeating the Black Star Ninja, Joe sees a helicopter that, like Senior Ortega, like he still has his hostage. At one point, like the buyers are there. The buyers, the people that are supposed to buy his equipment, his stolen equipment, are there, and this fight breaks out. And they see the fight break out, and at first, Ortega's is able to, get them to calm down. It's like, calm down. We got this taken care of. We're at a school full of ninjas. They'll take care of everything. But then when the army shows up and they start shooting everybody, the buyers are like, there's no way we're going to stick around for this. Maybe some other time. We'll do this deal another time. And Mr. Senior Ortega is incensed. And so as the buyers are fleeing, he shoots the buyers in the back, because they wouldn't come back and make the deal, I guess. But then he finds himself in a situation where he has to escape. So he grabs his hostage. He gets into the helicopter that I think was brought by the buyers. I think he's stealing the buyer's helicopter. And he prepares to take off. At first, he wants to wait for his Black Star Ninja, but then he sees his Black Star Ninja defeated. So he just tells the pilot to take off. And then as the pilot is taking off, the American Ninja grabs onto the helicopter and starts swinging on it. And he's fighting and swinging on the helicopter at the same time. Like he's dodging bullets from Ortega because Ortega is trying to shoot him. And, the American Ninja's like swinging around, avoiding bullets. And then finally he's able to knock Ortega out of the helicopter. He grabs a girl and they jump off the helicopter onto a nearby rooftop. And then you have our Corporal Curtis Jackson with the rocket launcher, and he rocket launches the helicopter into a big explosion. And that's it. The good guys won, and that's the end of the movie. So that last piece, that was actually pretty good. I liked it. Like I said, I watched it twice. And that's basically the appeal of movies like this. You're just trying to get to the next big fight scene. And it's really the martial arts that need to carry the movie. And I think that in a way it did. And you have Joe Armstrong, and he learns that he can rely on soldiers. He's part of a team. He can be a team player. Now, I'm not exactly sure if that lesson carries on in American Ninja 2 or American Ninja 3, and I'm not exactly curious enough to find out. So that's it for our favorite parts, and now we're going to talk about the top 10 trivia. In an interview with German media in 2012, Michael Dudikoff revealed that he sweated so much during the later fight scenes because he had malaria. So he's fighting through the pain. That is admirable. Steve James said in an interview that Michael Dudikoff was anxious about working with him. Since James knew martial arts and Dudikoff didn't, he didn't want to show up. James even requested his final fight scenes be filmed on the other side of the compound, far away from Dudikoff, to avoid any further problems. It wasn't until halfway through filming the sequel that the two of them set their differences aside. So that's wild. Why would you be mad that a martial artist knows martial arts? I don't understand why he's so upset. You knew when you signed on to this project that it was a martial arts movie. You knew when you signed on to this project that you didn't know martial arts. Why would you be upset at somebody who actually knew martial arts? I don't understand why. My mind goes immediately to that he's doing a racism. That's what I'm thinking. I'm probably totally wrong, but I don't understand why you would be mad that your co-star, who is known for doing martial arts, because Steve James started off as a stuntman, a stunt coordinator, before he transitioned into acting. So he was known for doing martial arts stuff. So why are you mad at Steve James for knowing martial arts? I don't understand that. Why are you anxious? You knew that you didn't know martial arts when you signed up for the movie. Okay, I'm ranting too much. Let's go on to the next one. Originally, the studio chose Chuck Norris to star. He chose not to do the film because he didn't want his face hidden on camera. He said, if I'm going to be in a film, I don't want my face hidden. I'm going to be me, which is kind of weird because you're supposed to be an actor, and sometimes actors hide their faces. Sometimes they're caked in makeup. Sometimes they're wearing a ninja mask. You know, sometimes you have a great actor that will actually wear a mask for the entire movie and never show his face. So I feel like Chuck Norris isn't exactly dedicated to the craft of acting. Director Sam Firstenberg has stated in an interview that his two favorites of the films he directed are this one and Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo from 1984. He said that this film has a special quality of innocence, true friendship, love, and youthful idealism. And I'm still marveling at the notion that the man who directed the martial arts flick American Ninja also directed Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. And it happens to be his favorite film that he directed, or one of his favorites. And another thing about that, the thing that tickles me about Breakin' 2 is that Electric Boogaloo has become kind of a meme, right? You see people saying people are saying such and such to Electric Boogaloo. It's like it's a thing that people say now, which I find delightful. In an interview in the late 1980s, Steve James said that when he signed on to do the film, he wanted to change a lot of the dialogue, like, no problems, whatever you say, partner. Like, he didn't want to say stuff like that. I guess he wanted the dialogue to reflect his experience. Director Sam Firstenberg admitted in an interview that audiences didn't like seeing a female ninja in Ninja 3, The Domination from 1984. For this movie, Cannon Films sought an action star who looked like James Dean, didn't talk much, and seemed to have a chip on his shoulder. Sam auditioned 2,000 actors and narrowed it down to 200. While Michael Dudikoff had no martial arts training, he had the look Cannon wanted. The opening scene where Joe is introduced playing with a butterfly knife as he leans against an army truck was not written or rehearsed that way. Initially, he was just silently leaning against the truck. But stuntman Stephen Lambert was watching the rehearsals and found the visuals to be lacking any action. He approached director Sam Firstenberg and suggested that Joe spin and twirl the knife repeatedly, as he had such a knife in his stunt bag, insisting that he could teach Michael Dudikoff how to expertly twirl it in just a few minutes. Firstenberg loved the idea, and the result is what is then filmed instead. Mike Stone was the special martial arts choreographer for the ninjas in the film, and he recommended Tadashi Yamashita to play the lead Black Star Ninja villain, based on the two having known each other from their competitive martial arts background. But because Cannon Films being notoriously cheap with their budgets, Mike Stone was then rehired to be the fight choreographer and the main ninja villain in the sequel movie American Ninja 2, The Confrontation from 1987, without again being allowed to recommend his other martial arts peers. I want to take a break and point out that this movie came out in 1985, and in 1985, they found 2 Asian people to prominently be featured in this movie, unlike a previous movie that I talked about in Reno Williams' The Adventure Begins, where I ranted as how they couldn't find an Asian actor in California or in Southern California. It seems outrageous to me. And in American Ninja, they had 2 Asian actors. Not only did they have 2 prominently featured Asian actors, but they actually were the right nationality. They were actually Japanese. So, Japanese men playing ninjas. Can you imagine such a thing in America? In 1985, some people could imagine it. Moving right along. This is the first of 3 films with Michael Dudikoff and director Sam Firstenberg. The other 2 were Avenging Force from 1986 and American Ninja 2, The Confrontation from 1987. And the last bit of trivia. A rare 1984 poster for Kiss's album Animalize is on a wall in Joe's squad's sleeping quarters. To avoid potential legal problems, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and Eric Carter's faces were covered with stickers, and the camera angle cuts off Mark St. John's head. So I did peep the album cover or the album poster, and I thought it looked like Kiss, but I wasn't exactly sure. And sure enough, it was Kiss with their faces covered up. And now that we've talked about the trivia, let's move over to the critics' thoughts. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critics have it at 0%. And I think there are about 8 critic reviews. The audience score is 47%. And on IMDb reviews, it's at 5.5 out of 10. So, same. What's interesting about this is that even though all of these reviews are rotten, some of them do have kind of a positive slant. And I wanted to find a more positive review. So the first 3 that I'm going to read you are from Rotten Tomatoes. And the last one is from a different website, and it has a much more positive view of American Ninja. James Kendrick of Q Network Film Desk wrote, "It persisted because it so perfectly encapsulates in a single film the beloved cheesiness of a bygone era, when low-budget action fare still had a theatrical presence and ninjas still had an air of mystery." Nick Rogers from Midwest Film Journal wrote, "Hilarious if true that Chuck Norris balked at what amounts to maybe 10 minutes of director Sam Firstenberg's 1985 film, C-grade cannon fodder, if there ever was, which is saying something." Yeah, it is kind of funny that Chuck Norris didn't even want to hide his face for 10 minutes of film time. It's kind of hilarious. Tom Long from Santa Cruz Sentinel wrote, "American Ninja was still a completely awful movie, but educational in its own way. Now when I see my next ninja movie, I'll have something to compare it to." By the way, I just want to say that my favorite ninja film is called Ninja Assassin. The last one that I want to read is from a different website. This is written by Dark Knight 125, and he's from Funk's House of Geekery. And he wrote, "This is by no stretch of the imagination a well-made movie, but American Ninja succeeds at being pure entertainment. The success of this movie would lead to a number of sequels and a devoted cult following." And that, I believe, is true. Finally, American Ninja is, at this recording, available on Amazon Prime. My next episode is scheduled to come out on the week of Juneteenth, and I've not had an episode that even slightly acknowledged this day or the celebration of African American culture. So I want to do it with our next discussion of a great Black American icon. I'm talking about Eddie Murphy as he offers a fantastic performance in The Nutty Professor. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlesscinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlit Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesterday with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.